Trump is on an annexation kick. Trump right now is on an empire building kick. And some people are starting to realize for the first time, he is somebody that has an imperial inclination. As long as it means that we can get something, I think he generally is of the inclination, then let's go get it. Whether, you know, the morality of going in and just forcing our will upon the people of Greenland instead of just negotiating a better security arrangement with Denmark, like responsible adults at the table, whether it's, you know, being unhappy about the fact that we gave the Panamanian people their land back, and overblowing a business arrangement between the Panamanians and the Chinese into a security crisis where you're threatening annexation, or now, as of recent, as we've seen, putting this, that's not even get to Canada, but putting all that aside, now this has reached the Gaza Strip. Now this has reached Palestine. Trump went on this rant. We've already talked about it on the channel. We'll publish a video about it on YouTube. Trump went on a rant where he essentially said, next to Netanyahu, that he would like to take all of the Palestinians in Gaza and move them out into Jordan and Egypt, both countries of which have said no already, but put that aside, move them there, and then take over. The United States takes control of the Gaza Strip, removes all the explosives and mines, and then rebuilds it. We take over the rebuilding priority, as well as building communities for the Palestinians to live in Egypt, in Jordan, in the meantime. And then afterwards, we don't exactly know. It seemed from the way he was talking, it could be any number of things. It could be, the general theme though was the Palestinians probably shouldn't go back. Why would they want to go back? Why would they want to go back? Was the general theme of when this was asked by the press, until eventually he starts talking about, you know, it's people from all around the world could live there. And he starts talking about it as if he's like, it's fucking, he's like Mr. House describing to all the people of the Mojave, you know, all the people of the world shall come to the Gaza Strip and settle, and we'll have all this great land, and it'll be fantastic and cool. And it seemed like he just wanted like to make a development project in the Gaza Strip after pushing all the Palestinians out. And then possibly it's either this weird, like, I don't know, Vegas of the Middle East dream or whatever that is, or it's handed over to the Israelis, or generally the theme though was he didn't want the Palestinians to go back. Now, afterwards, and by the way, when he said he didn't want them to go back, it was also with the general cover of, it's not that I don't even necessarily want them to go back, even though he also doesn't want them to go back, is that the Palestinians themselves don't want to go back. It's the Palestinians who don't want to go back. So this seems like an ethnic cleansing program to be replaced with a development plan for either his gain or the Israelis' gain. But it seemed like the first ever open call for a U.S. president for the, what possibly could be the permanent ethnic cleansing of the Gaza Strip from his perspective for their own good. And the only justification that he really threw out there for all of this, the only like historic there's a bunch of like pitter patter of like, why would they want to go back to these destroyed homes? But that's a piss poor justification if you're saying you're going to rebuild it. Doesn't make sense. The other one was, well, it's been like this forever. It's been a cycle of violence. So like, we got to break the cycle, and this is how you break it. But that's also bullshit, because they've moved the border a tons of times since 48, and that never ended the violence. The fighting continued fighting, and I don't see how that's going to change if you just force them into refugee camps in Jordan and Egypt and make more people stateless. So this is the situation that fell on Secretary of State, confirmed by 99 senators, not a single dissenting senator. The one that didn't was just absent. No contest, okay? This man, this distinguished senator, Little Marco, found the situation on his desk, and he had to now go do the fucking cleanup. That's his job now in this administration. Watch Marco Rubio the janitor, okay? Little Marco the janitor is the new nickname that I'm officially coining, officially throwing towards Marco. I'm building upon Trump's previous work. I'm making a remix. His job is to clean up for Trump on the international stage. It is for Trump to come out there, say some crazy bullshit, and he has to finagle it into an actual plan or proposal. And so that is what he does here during this 2-minute segment. But notice that he doesn't talk about the day after that much. And it's hard to really figure out if we're still going with Trump's line of the Palestinians aren't coming back, or the Americans are going to take over the Gaza Strip, and then eventually the Palestinians would come back, but with immense American leverage, because that's just implied and out of inherently, if you're the ones rebuilding and you're the ones that control the Strip, you're the ones with the leverage. Just like the Israelis had leverage when they were had some control of the Strip as well. Anyway, this is a situation Marco had to clean up. Let's listen to him try to do that.
Yesterday is an acknowledgement of the following. What President Trump said yesterday is an acknowledgement of the following. Gaza has been severely damaged. If you look at the aerial imagery, you see what's happening. The billions of dollars that are going to be required for reconstruction are enormous. Some areas have been rendered unlivable now and for the foreseeable future. And so what President Trump announced yesterday is the offer, the willingness of the United States to become responsible for the reconstruction of that area. And while you are rebuilding, while you're clearing debris, by the way, there are unexploded munitions. There are all kinds of Hamas weaponry still buried underground. For people to be able to live in a place safely, all of that has to be removed. It's an enormous undertaking. And the only thing President Trump has done very generously, in my view, is offer the United States willingness to step in, clear the debris, clean the place up from all the destruction that's on the ground, clean it up of all these unexploded munitions. And in the meantime, the people living there will not be able, the people who call that home will not be able to live there while you have crews coming in and removing debris, while you have munitions being removed, etc. That's the offer that he's made. It's actually, he made a similar, obviously we didn't have a conflict at the time, but when in his first term, he offered a $50 billion plan to help Palestinians, which was rejected by the PA and obviously others. So in the interim, obviously, people are going to have to live somewhere while you're rebuilding it. It is akin to a natural disaster.
Okay, we're going to pause for a second. Number one, that $50 billion plan, they were trading land in the West Bank, which now they're talking about, like renaming to Judea and Samaria, whatever. They were talking about trading that land for like a strip of desert in the middle of nowhere that they were going to make like tech development, quote unquote, which was going to end up undeveloped. Nobody was going to be employed. It was not going to work. It seemed like trading worthless land for land that a lot of people cared about. A lot of land where people want to live and like go back to their homes that are being continuously displaced by ever expanding settlements in the West Bank, which are 100% illegal under international law. So if that's the arrangement that they were thrown at, you can't really get too indignant at them for not wanting to accept that and just say, oh, $50 billion. $50 billion in what? $50 billion in what else, right? These permanent, like, people don't want to give up their land for just a settlement of 50 billion, especially considering that, a lot of that land would probably end up actually being worth more than $50 billion. You talk about like the total value that you could derive for that over time, depending upon, definitely depending upon increased investment. Either way, he makes it sound like it was very indignant of them to accept it. The other thing here is the way he talks about this. Oh, it's very generous of Trump, very generous. It'd be very generous if his plan was, we're going to go in, we'll clean up all the bombs. We'll then leave after we rebuilt everything and you can come back and that'll be that, and Palestine can have Gaza back. But the way he talked about it, he said, we will own it. We will own it. We will administer it. If we have to send troops, we will have to. It didn't, and then like people from all over the region will live there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It didn't sound like.
Here's some shekels for you, bro. It's not much, but I hope this helps.
Freaky
Sorry
Frosty.
to hear about your house and cat.
Thank you so much for the $20, and I saw you subbed earlier as well. I appreciate that. Thank you for supporting the channel. I appreciate it. But I think Freaky Frosty would agree that it didn't sound like, oh, I'm going to just give you back your land once this is all said and done, after we've cleaned everything up, and then that'll be the end of it, and then we can have peace, kumbaya. I mean, it didn't even say like you will get it depending upon no Hamas leadership, depending upon being taken over by the PA authority or whatever. No, it just, we will own it was the only real commentary we got on that. So saying like, oh, it was such a generous offer when nobody was really focusing on the idea that America would do bomb cleanup, which by the way comes with real risk to real Americans. Heard all this like America first, we're going to concentrate domestically. We need to stop sending all this stuff overseas, all this aid to places that we don't need to send aid to. And you know, you can make real strategic arguments for deterrence in Europe on continuing to send aid to Ukraine. You can make arguments about American credibility and the previous arrangements that we made with them. You can make arguments of ideology and the fact that, you know, I do believe that the Ukrainian cause of independence is valid, and I do believe that the reasons the Russians are invading them are really, really awful. Their imperial dreams are awful. The effect of it on the ground is awful, and I do believe that the Ukrainians want to strive for a more democratic society that I do agree with. And all these are, I think, in part and parcel all together, like different good reasons to support it. Not to mention like economic stability in Europe, all these things you can argue. But even if you disagreed with all of that and you were an isolationist and you said, screw it all, how can you argue to me that America taking over the Gaza Strip, doing the cleanup, possibly getting strafed by terrorists, and by, I mean, it's like, honestly, some of them I wouldn't even describe as terror if they're just going over and shooting our soldiers because we're taking over their homes and they're not allowed to come back. I wouldn't even, that's not terrorism. That's like, I'm fighting you for my home. We're not talking about fighting ISIS. We're talking about fighting somebody's like engineer uncle who used to own a car shop where we're now putting Trump Casino. We're talking about being the red coat. That's what we're talking about possibly doing. If it was just rebuild, clean it all up, which would already be a contradiction to the amount of costs to the American taxpayer and the foreign interventionism versus strategic necessity, and how much this would actually benefit the United States for us to be taking on this mission of rebuilding and an entire society from the ground up while beating back the previous inhabitants of that society. Putting all that aside, it just doesn't it just doesn't make sense strategically. So not only is this a violation of the principles that he was campaigning on, not only is it that, it's also the dumbest version of it, because it's abandoning something that I do think could be a real strategic necessity for the United States for what seems like a crazy Sheldon Adelson, Peter Thiel, Donald Trump wet dream pet project. You're just like playing, you're just experimenting in sandbox mode with millions of people, just like, oh, move them here, move them there, like he's Stalin with the Koreans or the Tatars. Just move all these people around. Who cares about the history and the relationships and what this land means to them, what these houses mean to them, what these communities mean to them? You know, just move this here, move this there, yada yada. And then he comes the next day and he acts like he's the savior. What a spin. That's Marco Rubio's job. It's to be the spin master.
For your camera fund, will you be holding a round table on Project 2025 before leaving for Ukraine?
I don't think I will be hosting any roundtables. I don't know how much I'll be talking about Project 2025, but I'm certainly going to be talking about things that were on the agenda of 2025. Because, I mean, many of those things are coming through forceful executive action through the president. Death. So I mean, I just kind of have to. But I don't think I'm going to do a segment specifically on 2025 or a roundtable specifically. But I mean, if you have any like information about it that you want me to take a look at, you can email me at DylanBurnsLIVE@gmail.com.
So what he's very generously has offered is the ability of the United States to go in and help with debris removal, help with munitions removal, help with reconstruction, the rebuilding of homes and businesses and things of this nature, so that then people can move back in. But in the meantime, they'll have to live somewhere. Now, the details of that, if it was accepted, would have to be worked out among multiple partner nations. It's a unique offer, you know, one that no other country in the world has stepped up and made an offer. But I think
it's a unique offer. He's, oh my gosh. On one angle, I could be like, what a bad salesman to just say, well, we're certainly unique. You know, that's the type of thing you say, like, oh, what's my outfit? Oh, it's unique. You know, it's like, oh, what do you think of my daughter? Oh my God, she has such unique features. You know, these are not things you say when you have a ton of things to brag about, a bunch of positive features. But on the other hand, right, we can attack Marco Rubio for being a salesman, but Trump is just not giving him a lot to work with here, right? If you're at the front porch of some woman trying to sell her some knives, and the first thing you cut, like the knife breaks in half, there's only so much a good salesman can do there.
That's one people need to think about. Seriously, it was not meant as a hostile move. It was meant as I think, a very generous move, the offer to rebuild and to be in charge of the rebuilding of a place, many parts of which right now, even if people move back, they would have nowhere to live safely.
I thought the whole pitch was we're done with nation building. We're not even supposed to be doing nation building in Ukraine. They're just asking for military aid. Can't do that. You're talking about an entire nation building project and making, like, I guess, a Puerto Rico of the fucking of the Levant for whatever reason. What? It's just it's also just like a spit in the face of the people who voted for Trump. This is something that's not going to play well with his base. This is such a terrible, terrible idea. This is so awful. Are they're going to have to find some way to pillow this and spin this into something else. And you can already see Marco Rubio trying to do that. But I mean, like, they're already, like, you're already doing it from a bad position because you've already given up, like, I'll do the rebuilding. I'll do the, for what? For what specific? Will the specific end up being, we'll rebuild the Gaza Strip if Hamas leaves? Which at least is not as crazy of a something he throw out there. But every time he throws out these crazy proposals, like, do you think this is going to buoy Palestinian resistance or tamper it out? Do you think they're going to get scared of Trump and, like, immediately surrender? Or do you think they're going to think, like, oh, okay, so it's literally now or never. This is the final battle for our homes. Like, are we truly processing the results of what the American representative, the biggest mouthpiece of our nation, is saying in public? Are we truly understand? We have troops throughout the region here. Like, they have bases within range of drones that can be fired. You know, people are just blood bags, man. It does not take a lot to kill a person. We got a lot of American blood bags to be, I'm not trying to be mean to our soldiers, but we got a lot of soft targets throughout the Middle East. And so there's no, like, the words of the President of the United States, buoying more and more violent resistance is not something I want. And I don't think that's what most Americans want. And I don't see how just saying, like, oh, we'll repair the Gaza Strip in a final deal could have just been the original pitch, not, oh, we're going to own it. It's just going to buoy resistance.
Because there are still unexploded munitions and debris and rubble.
Anyway, I wanted to move on to the CNN segment on this, and the reason why is Scott Jennings. Okay, let me see if we can pan over to Scott here. There he is, there on the left. I assume DMT tripping. With Brad Palumbo on the right here, right? Who I disagree with on many things, but he follows me on Twitter, so he can't be the absolute worst. But this is something that's so clearly against what was supposed to be the Trump base agenda. This is something that I don't see how any majority of American people are going to be pulled positively in this direction. This is something that's going to be a massive expense, and any fiscal conservative could spend hours jabbing at this. And that's what somebody like Brad Palumbo could do as a fiscal conservative on a panel like this, is jab at this. I mean, just talk about not only the initial cost of the removal, the cost for American lives when it comes to possible future attacks, or just from removals, because removing IEDs, I've worked with demining crews in Balaklia. That's dangerous work, man. You got to walk out into fields with a metal pole and stab at the ground looking for landmines and stuff. And with how many bombs have been dropped, and with Trump removing that 2,000, look, it's going to be a lot of work. That's going to be dangerous. That's going to be expensive. Before even the rebuilding process has begun, he could spend hours going after it. It's certainly not something that I think you can make a strong moral argument for, from an American, the people there don't want it. The Palestinians don't want it. And so on a platform like this, Scott Jennings' job is to be the pushback, but it's hard for me to look a man in the eyes in a situation like this where they're honestly trying to defend it this early on without saying, wait, because the most reasonable defense somebody could offer here while still being respectable in any capacity, and I know that's not Scott Jennings' job is to be respectable, is to say something like, look, This is bad, but let's just wait for Trump to clarify and see what happens. And then you could wait for someone like Marco to bail you out. But as this was still coming out, before Marco even tried some bailing out, Scott Jennings was in the trenches on CNN. This is supposed to be the libtard Clinton news network, trying to bail him out. As we're getting more and more soft covering, padding, and niceties towards the Trump administration from a lot of these networks, who I think are trying to both sides a lot of these issues much more than they should. This is not a both sides issue. I understand, you know, you have that opposition, but god damn, we've lowered the standards. Okay, let's watch.
They've been debating internally, according to my sources, recognizing as the United States of America, the renaming of the West Bank to Judea and Samaria. There's a bill about that.
Annexation.
That's what they're talking about. It's not exactly annexation.
You know what? Let me
just
actually
erasing the name of the West Bank.
Let me go ahead and play this, because this is the man that Trump has chosen as the ambassador to Israel, and everything that we're talking about here was telegraphed by him. This is in 2008 and in 2017. Listen to this.
Basically, I mean, there really is no such thing as, and I have to be careful in saying this because people will really get upset, there's really no such thing as a Palestinian. There's not.
My feelings personally, and I'm speaking only as a person, I think Israel would only be acting on the property it already owns. I think Israel has title.
When Mike Huckabee was picked for Israel ambassador, that was when I knew that the Trump position was going to be a million times worse than anything that Harris could even dreamably cook up. Because this is a man who denies the existence of a Palestinian people. He's 100% pro-settlement. He's not neutral in the settlement. It's not like he cares. He's pro-settlement. This is an ideologue. I don't know if Trump's really an ideologue on the issue, but if Trump puts these ideologues in these positions, as he's getting older, he did like 1/3 the amount of rallies he did the last time. When he ran in 2016, 1/3 the amount of rallies this time. He's getting older. He's slowing down. He's going to have to divvy up his agenda and his policies and give it to other people and say, here's a shotgun, get to work, do as much as possible. Because his whole agenda so far has been executive order, as fast as possible, as much as possible, overwhelm the system, make it so democracy can't focus on anything. And when I say democracy, I mean civil society, journalists, NGOs. They can't focus on any particular thing. They can't focus on the National Labor Relations Board. They can't focus on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the gutting that's going on there. They can't focus at USAID. They can't focus on any of these things. And so the whole plan is to overwhelm. But if you're going to overwhelm, Trump can't be the only one doing the overwhelming. It's too much work to do at the same time. He's going to have to divvy up the work. And if he's putting the ideologues in the positions of power when it comes to these issues, well, I mean, you're going to have Mike Huckabee as U.S. ambassador. You're going to have the ideologues a lot of times directing this. And I don't know exactly how Mike Huckabee is going to use this new Trump statement in whatever direction he wants to go forward on this. I mean, of course, Trump's going to be taking the lead. But when you say something like, we will own it, that's giving a lot of wiggle room for whatever the final position is. And maybe that is what it is for Trump. This is just feels like open negotiation. Like, we could just take it all. There will be no more Gaza. Like, maybe that's what this is. It's impossible to say because at this point, like, not taking Trump seriously on the issue, it's not something we can afford when we're talking about U.S. troops dying in the Gaza Strip, an extremely expensive, illegal, inhumane war where the only moral outcome or only moral thing you can do is to not participate and act against it as much as possible and do everything you can to stop it and everything you can really to resist it. And so even though, like, this might just be another one of Trump's, oh, hey, look, I'm going to annex Panama, I'm going to annex this, I'm going to annex that. And if you don't give me this, then maybe I'm going to go crazy. Maybe it is another negotiation move, but it gives him a lot of flexibility if this is where he's starting and then negotiates down to pick any number of horrid options, even if this isn't the outcome. And if it is, in the terrible, 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 terrible outcome where it is what he actually wants to go forward with, well, then obviously we have to move against it in all capacity. So it's it can't be normalized in any capacity. It is the worst he has gotten on the issue. And it coming post-election shouldn't be that surprising considering the horrific people around him, but I didn't expect just straight out we're gonna have the possibility of American Puerto Rico, and I mean, it's not even Puerto Rico. The people who live there would just be moved out. It would be, I mean, it would even be worse than like what we did in Hawaii. Honestly, I mean, this is crazy, man.
Deed to Judea and Samaria. There are certain words I refuse to use. There is no such thing as a West Bank. It's Judea and Samaria. There's no such thing as a settlement. They're communities, they're neighborhoods, they're cities. There's no such thing as an occupation.
This is illegal.
I didn't mean
this
to
is
interrupt.
illegal. This is what he just said. That is a violation of every international law. It's a violation of every convention that the United States, by the way, was part of. It's a violation of every
Human decency.
but also every UN resolution. It's a violation of International Court of Justice and International Criminal Court resolutions. What they are saying tonight to the world and to the international community, international law is dead. It's
Scott,
dead.
is international law dead? Because I think Rula is right in suggesting that that's
This is
basically
why
what
we
Trump-
just left the Human Rights Council. We just left it. Trump's leaving the World Health Organization. He's trying to leave any organization that could, from above the United States, from above him, from a transnational position, in order to keep the United States as a member state, could control American behavior. So, I mean, he's like an anti-globalist, but in the sense of any globalization that could limit his authority to act as executive in whatever manner. Even if these restrictions are just like, hey, here's some basic health restrictions that every state should abide by and some communication that we should have between nation states in order to help better combat diseases. Or if the standards like, don't like execute prisoners of war or something. But that doesn't matter. It's still a standard.
Trump is suggesting, forcibly removing Palestinians from their land is against international law.
I think we're being a little dramatic, and we're on our jump to conclusions, Matt, here a little bit. He muses occasionally.
Taking him at his word.
He muses occasionally.
Muses.
And
Just to be clear, you're
Muses.
suggesting that we are making this up or
No, I'm not suggesting
exaggerating
anything.
it.
No, you're
Trump-
putting words in my mouth.
Well, I'm
I'm
just
saying
saying
you and I
Trump
both know
said
he
it.
muses occasionally, and he's aspirational,
He's
and he
not-
says provocative things
Scott,
occasionally.
I don't look. I really don't want to interrupt you, but I just for my own,
What do you think about Trump's claim statement that we should take over and own the Gaza Strip? Well, he's aspirational, and well, he's a go-getter.
I think I have to come to my own defense here in saying Donald Trump, with his own words, said this is what he wants to do. He wasn't musing. He was looking down at a piece of paper. I've been in a room with him, just like that, with foreign leaders, looking down at a piece of paper. He is reading a statement that was prepared for him. Those are not musings.
Well, also, Scott, what happened to America first?
So I
this
think-
is the guy who was supposed to take us out of the endless wars, said he's against nation building.
You're stealing my
He
talking
railed
points.
against I am.
I know. playing the role of Catherine tonight. Red.
I do want Scott.
But are you for the ethnic
I
cleansing
do
or
want
against
Scott
it?
to finish his point.
Look,
Go ahead,
I don't
Scott.
know
not
that
for it?
I don't
You're
know
not
that I
against
agree
it?
with the terminology you're
Go
using.
ahead, Scott.
Here's what I think. It's provocative. It's an interesting conversation point. Donald Trump, he's the only person in the world speaking positively about this particular geography right now, and I will just say that
The only one speaking positively is taking it over and owning it. Oh my gosh. What a spin on like 1880s. Like, look, I know that like this Belgian Congo thing, people have been criticizing what's going on here, but look, okay, the Belgian king is the only one that's acting aspirationally when it comes to rubber production numbers, okay? Everybody else is saying that number's insane. No way amount of human production could produce that much. Like, it's such a spin on the idea of we're just gonna go in and take it over. What an aspirational way to talk about it. Yeah, I guess like it's aspirational for America to annex all lands. It'd be aspirational for us to annex Canada. It'd be aspirational for us to annex China. It'd be aspirational for us to annex everything. It'd be aspirational for us to say America should own every piece of land and everywhere. Like very aspirational. Aspirational.
in the first term, he did something rather audacious with the Abraham Accords, highly successful. He's always thought positively and aspirationally about the Middle East. And I would just ask all of you all who are enraged about this, how's it going right now? How's the current management doing?
I don't like all this violence in the Middle East. How about we invade it and conquer some land there? that'll certainly make the previous residents we've just kicked out and pushed onto refugee camps less violent. I'm sure if we start another, let's start an American colonial settler project in the Gaza Strip, that'll make everyone less violent, and it'll be nicer to American troops, and all of our soft targets across the Middle East, embassies and otherwise, will be treated so much better by the Arabs of the region, who very much do not like us already in our relationship to the Israel-Palestine conflict. No, what do you mean? Aspirationally. I mean, it's like always says the situation there is bad, so let's just do something, right? Okay, well, and that, then might as well just invade Iran, might as well do anything. The situation can always get worse. People's lack of imagination on how the situation can always get worse. Like, oh my gosh, I lost my foot. Can this get worse? Yes, if you take an axe and then chop off your leg, you have made the situation worse. Yeah, if, oh, the Middle East has a lot of conflict and war right now. Can it be worse? Yeah, I think invading and starting another conflict with another nation state while we have assets around the region that can be hit. Yeah, I do think that makes it worse.
Not really all that well.
To answer you, and thanks because that's because of Americans' weapons and American inability to enforce.
You're blaming us for the management problems in Gaza? Come on.
Wasn't doing a great job before.
Okay, let's be honest. We have a 58-year-old occupation that is illegal, that decimated people's hopes and lives, and I am the only Palestinian here, and I must say that it honestly, the fact that we are not able to put in perspective that's the history of that region. Before October 7th, hundreds of people were killed. After October 7th, still thousands and thousands of people are getting killed.
And what happened on that day?
For 58 years.
What happened on that day?
You know what? What happened on that day, actually, Secret Service of Israel had been predicted what happened on that day. What happened on that day is we had basically, you know, a border that was...
Just say it was a horrible terrorist attack, but a terrorist attack done by a group of horrible radicals is not justification for the erasure of generation after generation of Palestinian freedom. Just to say, because of this terror attack, now nobody here can have freedom. Is that how it's going to work? We just go through around the world and like all the well, you know, the Germans did awful things, so they can't have, you know, they can't have a state. They can't be Germany anymore. After World War II, Germany no longer exists ever at all. After any horrible thing that ever, it's a ridiculous standard. If we hold anybody else to this standard, then Germany couldn't exist, the United States couldn't exist, Russia couldn't exist, China couldn't exist. Again, there'd be really no major power that could exist, and a lot of minor powers too. When you talk about what they've done to minorities in their country, how the dominant ethnic groups were able to gain power in those countries and last those countries. I mean, it's a standard you nobody could surpass. And to say that because of this terrorist attack, now Palestinians are not deserving of freedom, both misunderstands the source of terrorism and is certainly misunderstands the solution to terrorism, which isn't, well, let's make all these stateless people more stateless. That'll reduce the terrorism.
You know, breached because we have a government in Israel, and as I am an Israeli-Palestinian government, we had a government in Israel that favored annexation and pogroms in the West Bank.
I'm just asking.
Germany was occupied for a while, to be fair. Look, but we're not even arguing whether or not Gaza should be occupied for a short period, or the Palestinians should have to have like a different like government forced upon them that is not Hamas, but is there, you know, that they will have to like then vote later down the line. No, what's being talked about right now, and all of those, we can have an independent discussion about any of those ideas for like a permanent deal here. Fuck all of that discussion, because what's being just talked about now is a possibility, even though all of those deserve their own discussion. And I think that might be the purpose. The purpose is to start with the worst option, so when they pick a very bad option, at least it's not literally Palestine doesn't exist at all and the Palestinians cannot exist. Either way, though, what they're talking about is possible ethnic cleansing program, the mass moving of these people off this land, the complete destruction of any possibility for a two-state solution, and either Israeli domination of the Strip or an American colonial project, a settler colonial project, right off the shores of the Levant. For what purpose? At what expense? How much will this cost? It will be expensive. It will cost hundreds upon hundreds of $billions, at the very least, possibly more, depending upon how much I mean, to have the troops there and the forces there and to defend. Oh my gosh. And so, yeah, no, like as a starting position, we're not even there yet. We're not even talking about like, oh, well, what about like a temporary occupation? No, we're talking about just like conquest.
That day.
I want to tell you something. We had a government, we had the prime minister who said Hamas is an asset. We need to finance Hamas. He's the one that sent to Doha the head of the Secret Service 3 weeks before October 7 to ask the Qataris to finance Hamas.
But you don't want to say what happened. You don't want to say what happened that day.
It's an atrocity that happened that day.
Yeah,
but
and where did it emanate?
That atrocity is it doesn't justify the atrocities and the war.
What's this dumb fucking smirk on his face? I really hate his dumb smirk. I really do. Like, what happened on October 7th? You really seem like you care. Thank you for putting the yellow ribbon on your jacket. You really care, Scott. You really seem like you care. You're using this in a capacity where she's trying to say, I do not want my people to all be moved out into giant refugee camps forever. And your response is, what happened on October 7th? And then you smirk at her, which after she says it's an atrocity, and then tries to talk about any of the other it doesn't seem like you care about it if this is how you're using it. You're using it as a diversion tactic. That atrocity is him trying to grab onto anything because it's such a obviously terrible idea, and he was in the immediate aftermath, and nobody, MAGA, Rubio, or otherwise, had laid any type of defensive structure yet to try to defend this dumb thing that Trump said. So he's just out there trying to grab onto anything.
It doesn't justify the atrocities and the war crimes and the genocidal campaign that happened after.
I totally reject everything you just said about genocide, war crimes. Israel has every right to defend itself.
I don't want us to get
not by committing war crimes.
I don't want us to get off course because I think that it is easy to redirect this conversation about October 7th when what we're talking about right now is what happens today and tomorrow and what comes next. And I want to ask you just a follow-up to what you said. Hold on. A follow-up to what you said. Trump is talking positively about the region, but in his view of Gaza, the Palestinian...
What is it? What do you mean talking positively? He was talking about like turning it into Gaza be the Riviera. It didn't sound like he was talking about, oh, well, all the Palestinians would come back and all get on their homes back. He was like, well, it would be good if many of them didn't come back. You know, maybe if they just stayed away. Like, that's not positive. It's not positive. Then that means like the Russians talk positively about Mariupol when they talk about just like giving the homes of people who have lived there for generation upon generation to a bunch of people from Tuva because you just want literally anyone else living in there so you can secure more loyalty than you would have from the locals that you just destroyed the community of. Then, oh, well, at least that's positive because they're talking about rebuilding something, even if it's with super corrupt contractors who are skimming off the top because it was kicked over to friends who are just making shell companies to skim off the top of public finances. Like, I guess it's positive because there's a rebuilding, right? They're going to build something there, but I mean, do we really want to build Las Vegas of the Levant on the bones of all these Palestinian children, knowing that right over a fence in Egypt, they're just sitting there?
Palestinians do not exist. How is that something that is positive for Palestinians? 2 million people that live there right now.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't give a lot of details about how he envisions the future for that population, and I certainly am not in a position to flesh it out.
Isn't that crazy? Oh, he's talking about Palestine. He didn't really talk about the future of Palestinians when he was talking about Palestine, but he talked about like the landmass quite a lot when he talked to development. But I mean, when it comes to the people who actually currently live there, talked very little.
Either, because I don't know what he means by that. Here's what I do know. Current management failing, a president of the United States who's speaking positively about what could be happening in that region, and you all talk about the Middle East being on fire, and nobody seems to want to acknowledge on whose watch it was set ablaze. And so, look...
What does this have to do with him talking about conquest? Like, wow, could you believe that this war started under the previous administration? What does that have to do with his plan to take it over? Again, it's deviate. October 7th, the war started under Biden. It's just anything to get away from what Trump said, which really shows the weakness of what Trump said there. This needs to be just slammed into. If Nancy Pelosi wants to do anything with the rest of her political life, with the rest of the time that she's in a position of power and she's in Congress and has significant influence, if she does anything in this moment, please just lead or direct some effort, like she was one of the main oppositions to the Iraq War, one of the main opposition figures in Congress to it, not in all instances, but in some. If she does anything of intelligence, just say, this is a terrible idea, this is very bad, we need to slam into him like crazy, everyone should go into hyperdrive saying, American troops in Gaza, no, American troops in Gaza, no, American troops getting sniped in Gaza, no. Just go into him super hard over this. This is such a weak position, which is why Scott Jennings is backing up and Marco Rubio is trying to pad it. So attack it before the narrative can be reestablished that what he actually meant was, which is up to his lackeys to do. It's never up to Trump to do. It's like what he was talking about. Oh, like J.D. Vance talking about Trump pardoning violent offenders. He's not going to pardon violent offenders. So he did. He pardoned the violent offenders. It was a lie.
I think sometimes he tosses things out, and it's to start a conversation, and we'll see where it goes.
Displacing millions of people.
From sending U.S. troops
I think it's also
to the Gaza
necessary, and I said
Strip
this earlier, but the fact that...
Dude, J.D. Vance was out there complaining about $4 egg prices. $4 for a dozen eggs was his complaint. He said it should be back down to $2.50 or $2.75 or something. That was his complaint. You can see like egg prices around the country like at $10, $11, $13, $14 in some locations. It's like crazy egg prices right now. This is like the issues that people actually wanted them to address. They're implementing tariffs that are just going to make the situation worse. And then declaring military operations and annexations that basically none of the American people support and goes against the exact mentality that got all those Joe Roganites and people possibly on board with Donald Trump. Like this is drop the ball early. But Trump went in there with an approval rating that is already not spectacular. And immediately after he won the election, his approval rating was some of the best numbers we ever seen. Trump's now back at like 47 on Gallup. Barely like a net positive approval rating, like barely. And he's gonna like go straight back into the negative real quick if the Democrats know how to take advantage and they don't let him squirm away from his own words. And if Democrats can pair these awful early policies, executive action overreach, with a positive agenda for the future, that's how you set yourself up for a future victory. That's how you set yourself up to make it so that Trump cannot pass more damaging agendas to the country with the slim majority he had. Make sure it's only 2 years and not 4 years. Either way, though, you immediately need to pounce on this. There can't be any delay.
The fact that we still, have hostages, the fact that we still have hostages that aren't brought back yet, the fact that that seems to be somewhat of an overlooked portion of this.
We have a deal, not a great deal.
Not only that, I'm interested to see, and there are people smarter than me about this, but what effect does this have on any ceasefire deal? What effect does it?
There's no ceasefire.
He suggested that it might actually affect it, and he.
So that's my point. I mean, if there are people who have, the innocent men, women, and children of Palestinian babies and innocent women and children in their heart and minds at the forefront, then they want a ceasefire. We want a ceasefire. If there are individuals who want the hostages brought home, then they want a ceasefire so those hostages can be brought home. Today makes no sense in actually moving that ball down the field.
And what about the American families who don't want their loved ones who serve in our service to go fight another war overseas in the Middle East that he has no clear vision for? But he talked about U.S. boots on the ground. That's a slap in the face to MAGA voters who specifically rejected the old neoconservative ideology.
Not only that,
he sounds like Liz Cheney.
He sounds that on. Donald Trump sounds like Liz Cheney. But Brad's wrong. Brad's being too nice. He doesn't sound like Liz Cheney. He sounds like Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld had a crack baby, and that crack baby grew up to be Donald Trump. Right? That right there is what he sounds like. because this isn't just, oh, we're going to take over and democratize the people and make them pro-America, which was at least like the pitch for the Iraq War wasn't necessarily that was what we were going to do. That was kind of some of the implication. The main purpose was to go in, weapons of mass destruction, but that was the idea of what would come afterwards. There was no, we're going to take all the Iraqis, push all the Iraqis out of Iraq, and then we're going to bring in people from like settlers to come in and land. There was none of that, because that is a pure colonial settler project, which is a different project than what happened in Iraq. So this is not, oh, he sounds like Dick Cheney, he sounds like Liz Cheney, he sounds like, I mean, like, he sounds, I guess, more like Curtis LeMay, who wants to, Curtis LeMay mixed with, I don't know, the king of Belgium who ran the Congo. It's not, there's not really a precedent for this in modern American presidencies, what he's advocating to happen here. So it's pretty, dude, what timeline are we living in?
Exactly what Russia and China have been saying. It's all about the land. And basically nobody watched what
Leopold II, yes.
Chinese said tonight. They said, we know exactly what they want, the Americans. Gaza, outside the Gaza shores, they discovered oil and gas. So it's not only
but this isn't a new concept. I mean, in March.
One second. It's about colonialism. Donald Trump today, he proposed a new vision for America, and it's colonialism. And he's been proposing this for other areas, Panama and other places. But tonight he went further. He said, Palestinians, we will send them, left and right, whatever. And Palestinians, by the way, the millions of Palestinians, they have families in the West Bank. They have families in Jerusalem. I have families in Gaza, and my family lives both in Haifa, in Jaffa, and in the West Bank. We can move them there. Why not allow the women and children to move actually to where they have relatives? Why not allow the orphans? There's 38,000 orphans in Gaza. We have orphanage that are empty in Jerusalem, in the West Bank, in Ramallah, in Jenin, and elsewhere. But you see that the vision is actually bypassing the Palestinians and ethnically cleansing.
I reject one portion of your statement, which is to say that there was a new vision of colonialism for the United States of America. I think that's as old as the United States of America. That's not necessarily a new vision.
I think the point that she's making is right.
No,
well, I mean, it is a new but it would be a new vision of an old. I don't. It seems pedantic.
But I'm also that Trump is doing right now that is about grabbing land. Yeah. There's no question about it.
No question. But I mean, this isn't a new concept.
Buying Greenland versus invading Gaza is two very different things.
Ethnic cleansing versus anything else is different.
Both of them are terrible. It's like, wait. Buying Greenland is different than ethnically cleansing. Yes, they're both. Imagine the state of like, wait a second, guys, come on. Buying Greenland when only 6% of them want to be part of the United States, because the vast majority of them have basically no ties to our country like that. That's different. Then it's bad. Is that they're both so terrible ideas. It's just one's much worse. They're both awful ideas. Look at the standard we're talking about. We're talking about Trumpian foreign policy. Annex this, annex that. What happened to the peace candidate? Never existed. Never existed. People say the ghost of Kiev was a myth.
But colonialism is not something that's new to the United States.
Sure, it's not new.
And that's my only point. But also, can we just point out the fact that, like, Donald Trump is probably the most honest broker we've had in American politics in recent history, because nothing that he's saying, nothing that he's doing is not something that he didn't tell us he was going to do.
Israeli Prime
That's true. Oh man, I didn't see this video, but they asked Palestinians about the U.S. taking over Gaza. Oh God, I'm just too curious. Can I hear? They say hear their reactions. Where's their reactions? It doesn't. Oh, did they have his press secretary clean up for him? I gotta hear it. I gotta hear it.
Explained just moments ago.
Why not rule out the idea of committing U.S. troops? This has been a long-standing argument that the president has made really over the last decade or so, talking about endless wars and not something the U.S. wants. Why not rule out troops?
Because I think the president is very good when he's making deals and negotiating not to rule out anything, because he wants to preserve that leverage in negotiations. And so I think that's what he's doing here.
Israel's far-right lawmakers are hailing Trump's plan. The Palestinian Authority says the move would be a recipe for chaos.
Meantime, here in Washington, Democrats on Capitol Hill are slamming the president's idea, while some Republicans don't seem willing to jump on board so quickly. CNN's Nick Robertson is live with us now for more reaction. London, Nick, what can you tell us?
Where's the real reaction? I want to hear the Palestinian reaction. They said Palestinian reaction.
And they were adamant they don't want to leave. Here's what they said.
A Kurd is a Kurd.
Here we go.
Cole Cynic has donated $20 for all the good work you do.
Hey, Cole Cynic.
It's appreciated.
Thank you so much for the 20. I appreciate that, buddy. I appreciate your appreciation.
All of our children's homes have been demolished and our house is half destroyed. Rain comes into the house, cold is coming in, and we will still stay whatever happens. Even if we stay in the tent, even if they give us castles and villas, we are not leaving our lands.
I want to die in my land, to stay in it. I was born in Gaza, lived in Gaza, studied in Gaza. I got married here and had my children. Whatever happens, I will never leave it.
And it's not just the people of Gaza who are saying this. We've heard today from the King of Jordan. Jordan's one of the countries that President Trump suggested these Gazans could go to. And he has said, we reject the idea of displacement. We've heard that from the French today, French officials. Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, in Parliament today, answering questions. Got questions about this because it's such a sensitive topic. And he said, look, absolutely, Gazans have a right to go home. They have a right to rebuild their homes, and he said we should be supporting them in that. That is pretty straight up rejection. And I think what is interesting, first out the gate to respond last night were the Saudis, who very quickly said we only support a two-state solution with the Palestinians. They're not taking on Trump on the issue of...
Museum got a Tier 3 subscription.
Hey.
The median age of the population in the state of Palestine was 19.9 years in 2024.
You know, it's a very, very young people. Very, very young people. Thank you so much for the Tier 3 sub. I appreciate that.
Pushing out Gazans, but it's clear, it's obvious, and I've heard this behind the scenes from diplomats, that if you talk about pushing out the Gazans from Gaza, you end the possibility of a two-state solution. So the message very clear from the region, Boris. Don't do it. It's a bad idea. That's the message.
Nick Robertson.
I mean, that would be the truth, though. I mean, it would be the death of a two-state solution. And I think that is what Trump, essentially, in one form or another, is offering if he was to go through with this plan and the Palestinians would not be allowed to return, is the death of the Palestinian people's community in Gaza and the death of a two-state solution. I mean, I don't see it as any other way. And the threat of this needs to be rejected in every way possible. I think next we can talk about maybe Elon being sued by federal workers. Yeah, we can do that story next.